Our next podium speaker is Lynn Lindsay with Classification of Investments. I know I ask her up in just a moment, but I want you to know that Lynn's a longtime member of our club program committee, well connected to our community from her activities that include a UW alumna, a Pacific Northwest Ballet trustee, SRSF leadership, and currently chair of the Mohi Foundation. Lynn joined Seattle 4 in July 2002. Please welcome to the podium, Lynn Lindsay. Would you like this box? Okay.
Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. Well, we have a real privilege today to have Governor Gregoire with us. And I'll confess that we're kind of related because my cousin, Scott Lindsay, is her son-in-law. So a little bit of an inside there. And Scott's with us. We're working hard on him to get him to join our Rotary here. So just a little plug. Okay, I wasted a minute. Christine Gregoire served as the 22nd governor of Washington State from 2005 to 2013. She's the second woman governor of Washington. During 2010-11 term, Governor Gregoire was also the chair of the National Association of Governors. Quite an honor. She was born in Adrian, Michigan, and was raised by her mother in Auburn, Washington. A graduate of Auburn High School, she attended UW, receiving a BA in Speech and Sociology in 1969. She then attended Gonzaga University in Spokane, receiving her Juris Doctorate in 1977. Chris went to work as Assistant Attorney General in the Office of Attorney General Slade Gorton, by the way, Republican. Her work concentrated on child abuse cases, coordinating with social workers to get children removed from abusive family settings, among other activities. Governor Booth Gardner appointed Governor Gregoire director of the Washington State Department of Ecology in 1988. During her tenure, she worked with Gardner to reach an agreement with the federal government to clean up the Hanford nuclear site. Gregoire served 4 years as ecology director before running for attorney general in 1992. She was Washington's first and only female attorney general to date. Among major accomplishments were helping to reach agreements about natural resources between the tribes and the state to resolve Native American fishing rights, better known as the Boat Decision. She also worked on children's issues, helped reform the juvenile justice system, and passed a new ethics law for government in the state. During her second term as Attorney General, Gregoire led a negotiated settlement involving other attorneys general with the tobacco industry that required tobacco companies to pay more than $206 billion over 25 years in reimbursements to the states for tax dollars spent to treat Medicaid patients for smoking-related illnesses. She won $4.5 billion of that as the state share of the settlement. The payments funded children's health services and programs and a $25 billion trust for health-related issues. Following 2 victorious, very combative campaigns for governor, she led sweeping changes to Washington's education system, providing college readiness, expansion of early learning, as well as introducing new government-accountable education goals. Washington was one of the first states to tackle rising healthcare and insurance costs. Governor Gregoire proposed major reforms, including how the state purchased healthcare, consolidating healthcare spending, and streamlined purchasing practices. She led implementation of the Federal Affordable Care Act in Washington state. Signed into law in May 2011, Washington was the 4th state in the union to implement the health insurance exchange. Among her most significant accomplishments was to garner public and political support to build 2 of the nation's largest infrastructure projects: replacement of the 520 floating bridge and a plan to replace the aging earthquake-prone Alaskan Way Viaduct with a deep-bore tunnel. As a $2 billion deficit loomed in 2011, she undertook broad government reforms to the state pension system, as well as reducing the number of state agencies, streamlining the size of government, and saving millions in both government funds and $450 million in unemployment taxes and workers' compensation rates. After leaving office in 2013, Governor Gregoire joined the board of the Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center, serving as a visionary leader. Governor Gregoire resides in Lacey with her husband, Mike. They have 2 daughters, Courtney and Michelle, and 4 grandchildren. She's here today to share the work of Challenge Seattle, an alliance of CEOs from 18 of the region's largest employers. As founder and CEO, Chris will explain the mission of the group as it focuses on improving the Cascade Innovation Corridor and partners with others in the region to foster a better Puget Sound. Please welcome Governor Gregoire.
Well, hi, everyone. It's just a delight to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Jimmy. Thank you, Lynn, for the wonderful introduction. You know, if you were sitting there and you were me and you listened to that, you would realize you're older than dirt now, Gregoire. Honest to Pete. Anyway, it is great to be here. Jimmy asked me if I would talk a little bit about Challenge Seattle. Before I do, I want to give a big shout out and congratulations to Jimmy for leading the Seattle 4 to such a wonderful year. And a premature welcome to his successor, Beth Knox, who is my companion in party planning with her vast experience at Seafair, but more importantly, a honkin' big congratulations on the World Cup. Wonderful. Today is understandably a lot of talk locally about public safety and homelessness. Nationally, there's a great deal of talk about inflation and the possibility of a recession. With all of that, and I live it every day, I want you to know that I am very hopeful about our future. Why? And I do agree with you, Nick. Why am I hopeful about the future? And that is because there isn't a whole lot we can't do in this area and this great state through partnerships. And I want to share that with you today. Having governed through a worldwide recession, I can tell you it was monumental and painful. Nothing defined my time in office more than how we got state government through the Great Recession, the nation's deepest and most prolonged economic downturn since the Great Depression. By all accounts, as a state, we were successful, but make no mistake, we were because we were collaborative and we partnered with the private sector, with faith groups, with the business communities, nonprofits, and local government. Through the Great Recession, Washington consistently was rated by independent groups as one of the 5 best managed states in the nation. The Pew Center gave us an A- for performance in managing public resources, tied for first place with 2 other states. With thoughtful determination for real change in how we did business, we built, as Lynn said, one of the healthiest, in fact, ranked #1 pension system in the country. Let me take it back. California was on the verge of bankruptcy in their pension system. We reduced spending by $11 billion. We were the only state through partnership to negotiate a reduction in salaries to state employees, eliminated 100 state boards and commissions, led the largest agency consolidation and reduction in modern times, and much, much more. It was all about partnership. We ranked 2nd in the nation in innovation capacity and globalization, #1 in moving towards a green economy. And Forbes ranked Washington State the 3rd best in the nation to do business in, and we also our exports grew by 119%. Now, why am I hopeful as I look at the challenges that we face today? Because we got through there, the results of which is we came out of that Great Recession faster and better than any other state. But no one individual, no one sector deserves credit. It was all of us together making that possible. So we've taken those powerful lessons and we've created an unprecedented public-private partnership here to attack the COVID pandemic. We are now using a very similar public-private philanthropic partnership to address homelessness. And we have a public-private partnership to look into our future and say, we want a quality of life and a system of transportation that works for all. So let me take you through that window of hope through partnership to show you what I'm talking about. So first of all, next slide, please. Who is Challenge Seattle? Well, we're 21 members, 3 nonprofit and 11 for-profit. We came together about 7 years ago, during which time we said we wanted to contribute back to the community at large through civic leadership in the private sector, but only if we did it in working in partnership. So we took that lesson when we were hit with COVID. And next slide, please. What we did is we said fundamentally it was our responsibility to stand up and be a humanitarian organization as we face down COVID. It was a Friday night we learned of the first death. It was Saturday we learned of the first breakout. It was Sunday we came in emergency meeting, and by Tuesday we were in full gear and taking action. We partnered with the public sector, the private sector, obviously of all kinds across the state, nonprofit and academic sectors. The results of which is we found creative solutions to once-in-a-lifetime problems. Within days of that first death in our state, we had calls that were set up daily by scientists, by experts, by the public sector, where I brought them together for the CEOs so they could tell their employees, based on facts, based on accurate information, based on science, really what was going on with immense experience. That number grew to over 200 statewide. The bottom line is we shared with each other not only how do you tackle some of these problems, but we brought in the public sector who often ask for help, and there wasn't a time we didn't respond with the help they asked for. Next slide, please. It was the quickness, the creativity, the collaboration that challenged Seattle set out among its members to work with others to make sure that we got the job done. We were the recipient of national attention for it. A Fortune article published in April was entitled "Saving a City: How Seattle's Corporate Giants Banded Together to Flatten the Curve." Members sprang into action. There wasn't much they weren't willing to do. Next slide, please. During the course of COVID, 300 calls where we brought all those experts in. We met the needs when asked by the public sector. We raised through All in Washington over $60 million for critical causes like emergency food or childcare for essential workers. We were able to deliver 5 million N95 masks and a whole lot more PPE. But let me give you an example of how it actually worked. National Guard was put in charge of global purchasing. National Guard doesn't do global purchasing. We said, we're prepared to help. So we loaned an executive from Microsoft for purchasing. We loaned an executive from Amazon to make sure that there was the ability to distribute. We also, at one point, were asked, we have to buy, but we can't advance money. Could you give us $50,000? By 5 o'clock, that call was at noon. By 5 o'clock that night, I said, we've got your $50,000. On another call, they had a lack of computers for unemployment compensation. It was a Thursday. They were almost out of date. We said, we don't know how we'll find them. We'll do our best. We delivered 80, which is what they asked for on Monday. That's how the partnership worked. Next slide, please. As the pandemic evolved, new questions came about. How do we respond? How do we kind of bring some degree of normalcy back? So we worked with Boston Consulting Group, and we worked with Public Health, and we delivered the first ever in the nation ability to really contact trace in a partnership between public health and the private sector. We also did an employer checklist of how do you open and stay open, and that too was made nationally known. And finally, we did an economic analysis of what we expected to happen to small businesses in particular and individuals who were losing their jobs. Our delegation took that to the mat in DC, and that helped pass the monies that we got to help our small businesses and our people who lost work. Next slide, please. We were worried about education, and rightfully so. We finally adopted a motto, which we said to the legislature and to the governor. Schools should be last closed, first opened. The consequences will be immense if we don't live by that credo. We decided we had to help Superintendent of Public Instruction on what were the best practices on how to open schools. So we worked with the union, the WA, SPI, teachers, and principals, and we gave them the model which was used too around the country. At the same time, concerned about how were we going to mitigate the learning loss that was occurring, and it will take us a long time to undo the damage. We gave those ideas over to the legislature and the governor, and they have been the reasons for appropriations by the last legislature and the one preceding that. And finally, higher education institutions. We brought them all together, all public, all private, community, 4-year research institutions who all signed an agreement on how they would collectively work together and open up with best practices. Next slide, please. Finally, that day came when we were going to have vaccinations. And I remember the governor calling and said, "Can you guys help?" And we said, "Sure, let's set up a call." We set up the call, and the governor says, "How can you help?" First words were from Kevin Johnson of Starbucks, in which he said, "Well, Governor, we deliver 2 million cups of coffee per week to satisfied customers globally. We can help you with the pandemic." And every CEO on the call had something similar to say. At that point, he said, "What do you recommend?" And we said, "We think you should establish a command center at the Department of Health, a public-private partnership." That was Friday. On Monday, he announced it, and off we went. We had weekly meetings with the governor for months. We tackled issues that they were having to address. We brought technology. We brought data systems. We brought the ability, for example, for Starbucks to go out to look at any mass vaccination site in the state with their global logistics team, and no less 30% increase in efficiency and effectiveness at every vaccination site in Washington state. Calls from across the nation came, so we created a playbook, and we shared it with every state in the nation as to how we were getting that job done. Next slide, please. What are the kinds of things that we were able to do? Well, the Department of Health set up a first-ever system whereby in 30 languages, residents could call in and say, "Where can I get my vaccination, and what kind of vaccination can I get there?" At the same time, as supplies were coming in, there was no system to distribute the supplies. So an Eastern Washington community would have too much supplies and it would go to waste. A Western Washington community would have inadequate supplies. We came up with a whole new system of how they would bring in and how they would track the supplies so nothing went to waste. And as I mentioned, mass vaccination sites became the most efficient and effective ever. So how, again, was that done? Absolutely, a public-private partnership. So I think in Washington state, having delivered 7.8 million vaccinations in the first 6 months, the city of Seattle being #1 in the country, we can be proud that yes, we went through a terrible time, but we made it through it, and we made it through it successfully, and we did so with our partnerships. Too often in Washington state, we have passed the opportunity to think big and bold about our future. Time for us to do that when it comes to transportation. And why not use that public-private partnership again? So working with the University of Washington, we've created what's called the Mobility Innovation Center. We take the expertise, particularly of tech companies, along with the academicians, along with the public sector, all working together to tackle some of the issues that the city of Seattle in particular and the county is facing today. But most importantly, we think we have to think big, think bold, and look into the future, unlike we've done before. So next slide, please. What we're doing is we're working as a mega region. And what's a mega region? There are 11 in the United States, 29 total globally, and they are the economic engines, literally, of the world. They've been designated for decades. We are one of the 11 in this country. We run from Vancouver, British Columbia through Seattle to Portland, Oregon. We're unique because we have said it's not just about economic competition, but it's about doing good and solving problems. As a result of that, we then began to look at all the success that mega regions have had. They've left challenges on the table. What are those challenges? Unaffordable housing, congestion, contributions, unfortunately, to emissions that are going to make it impossible for us to meet the Paris Accord. So how can we think big and bold to address that? We've come forward with one idea. How about ultra-high-speed ground transportation? Up to 200 miles an hour, could connect Seattle to Vancouver in less than 60, could connect Seattle to Portland in less than 60. Now, I don't mean to say anything, but as I listen to people say, well, that's kind of a far out, kind of weird idea. Really? Really. Bullet Train Japan, 1964. 64. So we're not really out there at all. 30 countries have it. We're not out there at all. To the contrary, we're behind. We're behind. So what could we do? We think we can meet the goals of no more than 30% median income for housing. The goal of, as we attract more people to the region, not increasing congestion at all, and reducing our automobile emissions by up to 80%. Now, why is this important? Well, our corridor is estimated to have between 3 and 4 million more people in the next 2 decades. If we think we have an affordable housing problem now, imagine that. So how could we solve it? Well, you can densify Seattle to your heart's content and Vancouver and Portland, and you can't get there. So do all that and then densify every mid-sized city around it to your heart's content, and you can't get there. You still have well over 1 million people with no housing. Now, what's that going to do? It's going to cripple our economy, number one. And number two, if you think we're going to get rid of homelessness, we're all going to keep the funnel going where we continuously have a homelessness problem unless and until we step up to middle income affordability, low income affordability. So it was last year, next slide please, that the Premier of British Columbia, Governor of Washington, and Governor of Oregon signed a memorandum of understanding to indicate that we would move forward to apply for federal funds, and we would work hard to make sure we got them. The legislature appropriated $150 million to match. Our delegation was able to secure, we have to apply, a space in the legislation that was passed in DC for us to be eligible for federal funding. We can, we should, and through a public-private partnership, unlike times past, we will do something for our future so we don't look at ourselves and say, why didn't we think of that when it's too late? Last window I want to take you through is one that I know is frustrating to all of you. It's frustrating to me. May 2021, we issued a report, Chronic Homelessness, a Crossroad. We called it a crossroad because we were suffering from a global pandemic, we had an economic recession, our shattered city centers were making it clear that our homelessness problem across the state of Washington was at crisis proportions. In 4 years, chronic homelessness rose at an annual rate of 27% across the state. However, in Seattle-King County, chronic homelessness rose 42% per year, second highest in the nation. When we went to the legislature, they said it's a Seattle problem and theirs to solve, we're not going to get involved. We said it is a statewide problem, and when we issued our report, we gave them not only polling across the state that showed that to be true by the priorities of the public, saying it was the #1 priority everywhere across the state, and also by showing them that at the end of the day, it's not a Seattle problem, it's a human problem across the state of Washington in a crisis. So, our report not only identified the problems, but said, you know, there are ways to succeed in this. Take a look at Bakersfield, California. They have reduced their chronic homeless population by over 70%. Or take a look at San Diego County, larger than us, where they now are at a 2% chronic homelessness, not 42, 2. So we issued our report in that May of last year, and then we said, you know what, we need to get these recommendations out to every community across the state. So we did. Emergency housing, on-demand services, the two go tandem, you can't do one without the other. A command center to deal with chronic homelessness, to focus on it unlike what we have done historically. Real-time data available all the time. Qualified, experienced case managers, particularly those with lived experience, to build trust and bridge to other service providers. And finally, to make sure it's transparency, accountability, and evaluation. We partnered with the Homelessness Authority here in King County with the philanthropic community and our Challenge Seattle members to fund them to focus through Partnership for Zero on Seattle. Now, I don't want to badmouth government, but we all know that government has a way. Give them $1 and everyone in this room will get a penny. At the end of the year, we will show nothing. If we focus with our dollar, however, on this table only at the end of the year, we'll show something. We succeeded or we failed, and we evaluated along the way and took a course correction. So we have asked that the authority focus on downtown Seattle and get us to functional zero with regard to chronic homelessness and stay there. Don't let it build back up again. Take the lessons learned from our 6 recommendations and that focus, and then take it to the next area in King County. That Partnership Zero is up and running today because of philanthropic contribution and a contribution from every member from Challenge Seattle. Then we decided we had to go to the legislature because the legislature had said the previous year it is a Seattle problem and theirs to solve. We created a coalition, unprecedented, over 100 mayors, county executives, chamber presidents, and housing advocates. We went to the legislature and we said, it is a human crisis. It's not a political issue. It's not a bipartisan issue. It's not a nonpartisan issue. It's a human crisis. We're asking you to please step up to it. Unprecedented, over $850 million for housing and services. So that's what partnership got us. Now, can I tell you we've solved it today? No. Am I hopeful? Absolutely. Because there's not a problem that I have seen this community, this state take on. If they did it through partnership, they couldn't succeed. So I hope you'll join me in these tough times and be hopeful. Hopeful that we can step up to these challenges and we can solve them, but only if we partner in doing so. Thank you.